The world of Ishma had always been peaceful. People there grew up knowing soft winds, bright forests, and long quiet nights filled with glowing insects. Most homes were simple stone shapes built into hillsides, and the people believed that, as long as they respected the land would protect them. For thousands of years, nothing happened to prove them wrong. So when the first strange signs appeared, thin smoke rising from distant mountains, flashes of blue light beyond the horizon, many citizens tried to convince themselves it was nothing. Maybe a storm, maybe a group of travelers, maybe just their imagination. But as days passed, more unsettling news arrived. Villages on the far edges of the planet were silent. Traders who normally came every week did not show up. And then one morning, a single damaged shuttle limped into the capital city, carrying frightened survivors. Their message changed everything. Something dangerous had landed in the outer regions. Something that moved quickly and left entire settlements empty. The survivors could not describe it clearly. They spoke in shaking voices about shadows in the mist, loud clicking sounds, and the feeling of being hunted. The Eshma were not a warlike people. They had no proper army, only small groups who handled security inside cities. They had never needed anything more. Now, they finally understood they were not prepared. The Eshma Council gathered in the central chamber, a circular hall lit by floating crystal lights. The elders sat in a quiet ring, trying to stay calm as they listened to reports from every corner of the planet. The more they heard, the more their fear grew. They knew that if the threat kept spreading, their world would fall in a matter of weeks. They needed help, real help from someone stronger, someone who could defend them. That was when an old historian stepped forward with a suggestion. He spoke of an ancient device stored deep beneath the city, a transmitter built long before their modern age. According to old stories, it could send a distress signal far into space. The ancestors had created it during a troubled era, when they feared they might someday need allies beyond the stars. But after centuries of peace, the device was forgotten, left untouched in a sealed chamber. Some elders hesitated. The device was old. No one knew exactly who would hear the call, or what kind of species might come. But doing nothing would mean losing everything. After a long silence, the council agreed they would send the signal. A small team traveled down into the underground vault. Dust puffed into the air as they unsealed the heavy door. Inside, the machine waited like a sleeping giant, metal panels, crystal towers, and a strange round core that glowed faintly when touched. The team worked carefully, following the preserved instructions. Soon the room filled with a low humming sound. The device grew brighter. A pulse of energy rushed outward and disappeared into the sky. Every person in the chamber let out a breath. The message was sent. Now they could only wait. The next few days were full of tension. People walked through the city with worry in their eyes. Markets were quiet, homes dim, streets empty after sunset. Families stayed close together. Teachers comforted frightened children, telling them that help would come soon, that someone out there would hear their call. At night, the sky seemed to hold its breath. Then one morning, the clouds above the capital rippled with sudden color. A bright streak cut across the sky, and another. Alarm bells rang as citizens rushed to the open plazas, staring upward. For a moment, there was panic. No one knew if this was rescue or a new threat. But when the ships broke through the clouds, something about them seemed different. They were sleek, but not heavily decorated, and far smaller than the Eshma expected. They did not resemble the great vessels of the well-known star empires. Instead, they looked simple, practical, rough around the edges. The Eshma officers exchanged confused glances as the lead ship descended toward the landing field. This wasn't what they had imagined. The stories said the galaxy was full of powerful and elegant civilizations with long histories of exploration. They expected graceful craft, golden sails, or shimmering engines, but these ships were plain. The vessels landed with a heavy thud, kicking up dust. A ramp lowered. A group of tall, upright figures stepped out. Their movements were confident, but not aggressive, as if they were used to arriving in strange places without fear. They wore simple dark uniforms with patches showing a blue and green world. The HFY guard stiffened when they recognized the symbols. They had seen this planet in their databases. Earth.A Class 12. Deathworld. The kind of world where storms could tear forests apart. Animals could be larger than houses, and even the smallest plants could be poisonous. A place where life had to fight to survive. Species from such planets were rare, and usually considered unpredictable. Whispers spread through the crowd. Why did a Deathworld respond? Where were the peaceful empires? Had the distress call reached only these beings? The HFY were not sure. If they had been saved or doomed. Their leader stepped forward. He greeted the visitors carefully, trying not to show his fear. The human commander responded with a calm nod. Her voice carried a strange mix of warmth and firmness, like someone who cared deeply but had been through many challenges. She introduced her team. They had come because the signal indicated a severe threat. Their job, she explained, was simple: help people in danger. Some HFY felt relief. Others felt more nervous. The humans analyzed the situation quickly, asking sharp questions about the missing villages, the survivors, the strange shadows described in the reports. Their tone was brisk, almost too direct, as if they were already planning defensive strategies in their minds. To the HFY, who valued gentle speech and slow decisions, the humans sounded almost cold. But there was no cruelty in their eyes, only focus. The council invited the human commander into the chamber. She studied the maps and listened to the reports without flinching. When the elders spoke about the vanished settlements, she didn't react with horror, only determination. She assured them they were not alone anymore. Still, the HFY could not shake their worry. These were Deathworlders, people shaped by a planet far harsher than anything they could imagine. Were such beings capable of patience? Could they understand fear? Would they help with empathy? Or would they respond with dangerous force? Outside the chamber, citizens gathered along the balconies to watch the newcomers. Children peeked out from behind their parents, whispering about the strange shape of the human eyes, the roughness of their uniforms, the confident way they walked. Many had never seen an off-worlder in person, let alone one from such a feared planet. The humans began inspecting the city's defenses, or rather, the lack of them. They walked through the wide plazas and narrow streets, pointing out locations where protective barriers could be set up. They requested access to nearby hills so they could place sensors. They examined the damaged shuttle brought by the survivors, and asked gentle questions to whoever felt strong enough to speak. Everywhere they went, the HFY watched. Some were hopeful, some trembled. Some doubted this rescue would turn out well, but one thing became clear as the day went on. The humans were not careless. They were serious, alert, and surprisingly compassionate in small ways. They offered water to tired workers. They reassured frightened children. They treated the injured with soft voices and steady hands. Still, the HFY struggled with the same thought. Why did Deathworlders come? As night fell, the city lights flickered on. The sky was quiet again, but the feeling had changed. Something powerful had arrived. Something unexpected. Something that made the people of HFY both nervous and strangely hopeful. They had cried out for help, and someone had heard them. They just never imagined it would be Earth. The first day ended with the council watching the humans set up temporary camps and study equipment around the landing zone. The humans moved quickly, like people used to dealing with emergencies. The Eshma leaders exchanged looks filled with questions. None of them knew what tomorrow would bring, or whether they could truly trust these new arrivals. But deep down, they all understood one thing. Whatever danger was coming, they were no longer facing it alone. When the humans arrived, the people of Ashima expected the situation to immediately improve. They believed that once an advanced species stepped onto their soil, everything would fall into place. But it didn't happen that quickly. The humans were helpful, yes, but they were also confusing. Their behavior didn't match anything the Eshma had imagined. Every movement, every reaction, every sentence the humans spoke felt different. The first moment that truly surprised the Eshma happened not long after sunrise on the second day. The human commander gathered her team near the landing zone and began explaining their plan to examine the outer regions. Her voice was calm, but she spoke quickly, as if every second mattered. Her team listened with full attention, nodding in sharp, precise movements to the Eshma observers. This was startling. They were used to slow discussions, gentle suggestions, and long pauses to allow everyone to think. The humans seemed to operate at twice the speed. Even the way they stood shoulders squared, feet planted firmly, gave the impression that they were ready to run, fight, or solve a crisis at any moment. Some citizens whispered among themselves, "Do they ever relax? Why? Do they look so serious? They act like danger is normal for them." In a way, it was. The humans came from a planet where storms, quakes, wild animals, and harsh climates were part of daily life. Hardship wasn't strange to them. It shaped the way they moved and planned, but the Eshma didn't know that yet. All they saw were tall strangers with determined eyes. The commander met with the Eshma council again. The elders offered warm tea and gentle greetings, trying to make the humans feel welcome. The commander thanked them politely, but her attention returned to the matter at hand. She asked direct questions about the missing villages. How many? How far? What signs were left behind? And whether there was any pattern. Her questions felt blunt to the Eshma. Not rude, just very straightforward. She didn't speak with fear or hesitation. She spoke like someone used to dealing with serious problems. One elder tried to reassure her by saying, "We hope the danger will turn away." The commander paused, then answered honestly, "Hope is good, but a plan is better." The elder blinked in quiet surprise. It wasn't the sort of answer he expected. But the more he looked at the commander, the more he realized she wasn't being disrespectful. She was trying to help in the way she knew best. Still, old worries remained. A Deathworld species solving their crisis? It felt unreal. Later that morning, the humans walked through the city once again. They moved in small teams, placing scanners, adjusting detectors, and examining old communication towers. They even climbed onto rooftops to get a better view of the surrounding landscape. Eshma citizens followed them from a distance, curious but unsure. One moment stood out clearly. 2 humans were adjusting a small device on a tower when one of them accidentally dropped a metal tool. It clattered loudly on the stone surface below. Several Eshma gasped loud noises usually signaled danger, and most people avoided sudden movements that might cause alarm. But the 2 humans simply looked down at the tool, then laughed lightly at themselves. A short laugh, a quick shake of the head, and then they continued working to the Eshma. This was strange. If something fell, it could be a sign of something going wrong. But the humans didn't panic. They didn't even look nervous. They treated the mistake as something completely normal. One young Eshma asked softly, "Why were they laughing?" Her mother answered, "Maybe they are not afraid of small accidents." Her words were meant to comfort, but they only raised more questions. If these humans were not afraid of accidents, what did they fear? While most humans were in the city, a smaller group traveled to the outskirts with an Eshma guide. They visited the closest vanished village, which stood empty but untouched. The guide explained that the missing people had left behind their tools, their crafts, even meals on some tables. It looked like everyone simply walked away at the same moment. The humans listened carefully. They asked questions about wind direction, soil movement, and the usual animal patterns in the area. They knelt to inspect footprints, examined broken branches, and checked the air for unusual scents using small devices. Everything they did was focused, an almost methodical dot at one point. The guide worried he had failed them. "I cannot describe the danger well," he said. "It all happened too fast." The humans looked up and reassured him gently. "It's okay," one of them said. "We'll figure it out." Their tone was soft, almost surprisingly warm. It eased the guide's guilt, but it also left him puzzled. He expected Deathworlders to be wild, impatient, or unpredictable. Instead, they were calm and surprisingly understanding. It was their confidence that felt strange, not aggressive confidence, but the kind that came from surviving difficulties others could barely imagine. Back in the capital, the commander called for a meeting in the open plaza. She wanted to share what her team had found. Citizens gathered around as she explained in simple words that whatever force was causing the disappearances was moving in a steady line toward the main city. She didn't say this to frighten them. She said it because she believed honesty mattered. "We still have time," she added, "but we need to prepare together." The word prepare made many Ishma nervous. They never planned for battle. They barely had proper defense systems. Their strongest force was a group trained mainly in crowd safety and forest rescue. One elder raised a cautious question. "What do your people suggest we do?" The humans exchanged glances. They weren't sure how to explain everything without causing alarm. Eventually, the commander spoke slowly and kindly. "We want to build barriers around the city. We want to scan the ground and sky for any movement. We want to train your guards so they know how to stay safe. And we want to help move families toward the center of the city." Her plan made sense, but it also frightened the crowd. Moving families? Training guards? Building barriers? It all sounded like they were expecting something worse, that the Ejma weren't used to swift decisions. But the humans worked with momentum. They didn't wait for perfect information. They acted fast because that's what survival taught them. Still, something remarkable happened as the day continued. The Eshma saw that the humans were not trying to take control. They didn't bark orders or demand authority. They discussed everything with the council first. They offered suggestions, not commands. They helped elderly citizens carry water, fixed broken carts, and listened to children's questions with patient smiles. Slowly, the Eshma began to relax around them. Not fully. Not yet. But enough to see the humans not as monsters, but as strange and determined helpers. One small moment touched many hearts. A child approached the commander, holding a small carved stone figure. The child asked shyly, "Are you here to protect us?" The commander knelt and took the tiny figure carefully in her hands. "We're here to stand with you," she said. "You're not alone." The simple words carried a warmth that spread through the crowd. By evening, lanterns lit the streets with soft light. The city felt different, not safe, but no longer hopeless. The humans sat with the council one more time to discuss the next day's scouting mission. The elders listened closely now, understanding that these visitors were not trying to frighten them. They were trying to prepare them. As the night grew deeper, an Eshma elder watched the humans from a balcony. They were laughing softly among themselves, sharing food from silver packets, checking their equipment with practiced ease. They were strange, yes. Their presence was overwhelming at times. Their style was fast, direct, and full of urgency. But beneath all that, they felt. Human. Not in species, but in spirit. The elder sighed quietly. She still didn't fully understand these newcomers, but she could no longer deny one thing. The distress call had been answered, and whether or not the HFY were ready for it. The people of Earth had arrived, and they were already planning how to keep everyone safe. From the moment the humans started preparing the city, the people of HFY realized something very unusual. Humans approached danger the same way they approached ordinary tasks. They didn't panic. They didn't whisper in fear. They worked with the same energy someone might use to repair a roof or plant crops. It was strange, even confusing, to watch these newcomers treat a coming threat like it was just another problem to solve. On the third morning after the humans arrived, the sound of tools echoed across the city as the humans began setting up defensive equipment. Long metal frames were lifted into place along the plaza edges. Small devices were buried in the ground and connected with thick cables. Scanners the size of backpacks were carried up the hills around the city. Everything the humans did had purpose. But what shocked the HFY most was how the humans behaved while doing all this. A group of human engineers worked near the east gate, setting up tall metal pillars. They argued among themselves in light voices, disagreeing on angles, timing, and settings. To the HFY, raised in a culture where open arguments were rare and often seen as disrespectful, this was surprising. But the tone wasn't hostile. It was almost playful, like family members teasing each other. One of them laughed as another misread a measurement. Another replied with a dry joke. They argued, but then smiled, fixed the equipment together, and moved on without tension. The HFY standing nearby were stunned. One whispered to another, "Are they having a fight?" The other answered, "I think they are," enjoying themselves. Even more confusing was the humans' casual bravery. When a sensor on a high wall malfunctioned, 2 humans climbed the narrow beams faster than any HFY athlete. The wall wasn't unsafe, but it was high, and the idea of doing that without hesitation made many citizens look away nervously. The humans fixed the device, climbed back down, and started chatting about what they wanted for dinner. To the HFY, it was almost unbelievable. Their minds struggled to understand how the humans could be so calm. The commander spent most of her day reviewing maps with the guards of HFY. She was patient with them, explaining what the humans had discovered and what they expected. The guards tried their best to follow along, though it was clear they were overwhelmed. Their training had never included this kind of crisis. At one point, the commander pointed at a marked region and said, "We want to establish a watch line here. It's important that everyone knows what to do if they see movement." The lead guard listened carefully. He nodded but admitted, "Our people are not used to watching for danger." The commander gave a small smile that held both understanding and encouragement. "That's okay," she said. "We'll teach you. You'll do fine." The HFY guards were surprised. They expected judgment from a Deathworld species. Instead, they received patience. Meanwhile, other humans continued their work across the city. One group was building something large in the central plaza, a long rail-like structure placed on supports. A crowd gathered around it as they worked. The humans explained that it was a type of launcher that could fire glowing spheres of energy high into the sky, acting like bright warning lights. As they worked, one of the glowing spheres flickered accidentally. The humans reacted quickly, adjusting it with calm, steady movements. They didn't shout, didn't panic, just handled it like fixing a lantern. The HFY, watching from the edges of the plaza, couldn't help but whisper among themselves, "They seem fearless. They don't act like people facing danger. Do they even understand fear?" But the truth was that humans did understand fear. They simply lived with it differently. On Earth, fear didn't always mean running away. It often meant preparing, adapting, and moving forward anyway. In the afternoon, the commander took a small group of humans and HFY guards to a hill overlooking the forest. They placed several box-shaped detectors at different points on the slope. As they worked, two humans started discussing what they thought the threat might be. Their conversation was direct, filled with ideas and possibilities. But not once did they raise their voices in fear. One HFY guard finally gathered the courage to ask, "Why do you speak about danger so calmly?" A human paused, then gave an honest answer. "Because getting nervous won't help us. Thinking clearly will." The guard nodded slowly. It made sense, but it still felt strange. On HFY, fear was usually met with caution. On Earth, fear was met with action. While that team worked on the hill, another group of humans was inspecting the roads outside the city. They walked along the dusty paths, scanning the ground with handheld devices, occasionally stopping to take samples from the soil. One of them tried to explain their findings to a curious group of HFY villagers. "We're looking for patterns," the human said. "Maybe we can tell how far the danger has moved." The villagers listened closely, fascinated by how the humans' tools chirped and blinked. One villager asked, "Are you worried about going outside the city?" The human shrugged lightly. "A little, but we're used to this kind of work." That answer surprised them even more. The idea that anyone could get used to exploring areas that might hold danger felt unreal. But to the humans, it was second nature. Later in the day, the commander and several HFY elders walked through the city to check on their progress. Everywhere they went, humans were busy. Some were building new communication transmitters. Others were teaching HFY volunteers how to look for subtle changes in the environment. A few even took time to speak with children, explaining their equipment in simple words and letting them touch harmless tools at one small lesson. A human showed a group of HFY how to use a long-range scanner. The device hummed softly as it detected movement from small animals deep in the forest. The human smiled as the children stared with wide eyes. "See? It's just a tool to help us understand what's out there." The children laughed and clapped their hands. Even the elders couldn't help but smile at the gentle interaction. But the most surprising moment came in the late afternoon, when the humans held a small training session for the HFY guards. They taught them how to stay aware of their surroundings, how to listen for unusual sounds, and how to send quick signals if they spotted anything strange. The guards were nervous. They moved cautiously, unsure if they were doing anything right. But the humans encouraged them at every step. They clapped softly, gave small nods, and said simple phrases like, "Good job," or "You're getting better." By the end of the session, the guards stood a little taller. They still didn't feel ready, but they no longer felt helpless. In the evening, the humans gathered at their campsite. They sat in a circle, eating food from silver packets and talking softly about their day. Some laughed quietly over small mistakes they had made. Others shared stories from past missions. The commander listened, nodding thoughtfully, her face calm but determined. Not far away, a group of HFY watched them. They whispered among themselves. But this time the whispers held curiosity instead of fear. They care about each other. They work so hard even when they are tired. They speak kindly to you. They're not what we expected at all. One elder, standing among them, said quietly, "They are strong. But their strength is not cruel. It is protective." The others nodded. The fear of Deathworlders began to fade, not fully, but enough for hope to take its place. As the night grew darker, the humans activated the new warning lights. Bright orbs rose into the sky and hovered like stars made by hand. Their glow spread across the city, casting a warm, safe light over the streets. People watched from their windows and rooftops. For the first time since the crisis began, the city didn't feel completely vulnerable. The humans weren't just building defenses, they were building confidence. The world of HFY still didn't fully understand Earth's people. Their energy, their mindset, Their strange humor and their fearless behavior all felt alien. But the more they watched the humans work, the more they saw something deeply human. Beneath it all, they weren't reckless. They weren't heartless. Were simply used to facing danger and choosing to protect others anyway. And as the glowing lights shined above the city, one truth settled quietly into the hearts of Ishmael's people. Whatever was coming, the humans would stand between them and the darkness. The fourth morning arrived with a sky that felt heavier than usual. Soft clouds moved slowly over the city, almost as if they sensed something approaching. People woke early, but the usual calm morning sounds were missing. No soft singing from balconies. No light chatting in the markets. Instead, everyone seemed to be waiting for a sign, good or bad. The humans were awake before sunrise. They moved around their temporary camp with focused energy, checking devices, talking quietly, and sharing information gathered from the previous night's readings. The commander stood near a large scanner, studying its glowing screen. Her expression was calm, but there was a seriousness in her eyes that made even the guards step closer. An Eshma elder slowly approached her and asked, "Is something wrong?" The commander turned to him gently. The sensors picked up movement far outside the forest. Something is coming closer. Not too fast, but steady. The elder's shoulders dropped. So the danger is real. The commander nodded. Yes, but we still have time. And we're ready. The elder tried to smile, but worry still weighed on him. Even though the humans had shown skill and strength, the idea of anything approaching their home was frightening. The Eshma had lived for generations without facing such fear. As the sun slowly lifted, the humans spread out to their stations. Some climbed onto rooftops to adjust the high scanners. Others set up energy shields along the open fields. A few stayed in the command tent, watching the lines on their screens. The Eshma guards joined them, though many looked nervous. Their hands shook slightly, and their steps were slower than usual. One human noticed a guard breathing too fast. He placed a hand on the guard's shoulder and said softly, "Hey, take your time. It's okay to be scared. Just breathe. You're doing great." The guard blinked in surprise. He didn't expect comforting words. He nodded, took a steady breath, and continued preparing. The simple kindness helped more than he expected. As time passed, more citizens gathered on rooftops and balconies. They didn't want to get in the humans' way, but they felt the need to witness what was happening. Some held each other's hands. Others held small lanterns for comfort. Children sat quietly beside adults, sensing that this was not a normal day. Around midday, a sudden sound came from the scanners, a soft tone that made everyone look up. A group of humans exchanged quick glances, then signaled for the commander. She rushed to the nearest console. One of her team members said, "It crossed the second line." "How far?" The commander asked, still outside the forest, but heading straight toward the valley. The commander nodded. "Let's prepare the watch teams." The Eshma guards heard every word. They tightened their grips on their simple tools, trying to look ready. But inside, many felt their hearts pounding. Seeing the humans react so calmly confused them again. The humans didn't seem shaken at all. They simply adjusted their plans, like someone preparing for strong rain. The commander then called out clearly so everyone could hear, "This is not an attack. It's a scouting moment. We're only watching. Stay calm." Her voice carried across the plaza, steady and reassuring. The words helped the Eshma breathe a little easier. Not long after, the humans took positions along the observation line set up on the eastern hill. The commander stood at the front, with both humans and Eshma guards beside her. The hill overlooked miles of open land, and the dark line of the forest beyond. The wind blew gently. The grass moved like soft waves. From a distance, Nothing looked dangerous. But the humans trusted their equipment, and the HFY trusted the humans. One of the guards whispered, "I don't see anything." A human beside him replied softly, "You will soon. Just remember, stay calm and observe." Minutes passed. The air thickened with anticipation. A few guards swallowed nervously. The commander kept her eyes fixed on the horizon. Then a slight shift in the distant tree line drew her attention. Not loud, not sudden, just a small ripple in the tall leaves, like something brushing through them. The forest edge moved again, slightly stronger this time. The humans adjusted their binoculars and scanners. One of them whispered, "They're close." The guards felt their breaths catch. Their instincts told them to step back. But the humans stayed firm, planting their feet like they were ready to hold their ground. One guard finally asked in a tight voice, "Are we safe here?" The commander nodded slowly. "Yes, we're just observing. Nothing can reach us from this distance." Her calmness was like a blanket thrown over a fire. It didn't remove the heat, but it kept it under control. More citizens gathered behind the hill, watching quietly. None dared make loud noises. It almost felt like the entire planet was holding its breath. Then, for the first time, a clear shape emerged from the trees. It was distant, so its details were blurred, but the movement was unmistakable. It was larger than any animal, and it moved with a slow, steady intention. The guards trembled. Some took a step backward. But the humans didn't flinch. The commander lowered her binoculars and turned to the guards. "Listen, I need you to stay steady. This is only the first sighting. We're not here to confront it. We're here to learn how it moves." A guard replied, "It's heading toward us." "Toward the valley," the commander corrected gently. "Not directly to us. And we're far enough to stay safe." Her words made the guards feel a little more grounded. One human took out a scanning pad and started speaking calmly. "Movement rhythm is consistent. Looks like a single creature. No signs of a large group yet." Another human added, "Distance is enough. We have time." Every word was measured and clear. Listening closely, began to understand something important. Humans weren't fearless because danger didn't exist. Humans were fearless because they had learned how to face danger step by step. The sight of the creature still far, still hidden behind soft layers of trees, was frightening. But the humans treated it like an important observation, not a threat that would crush them. After a few more minutes of watching, the creature moved deeper back into the trees. The movement slowed, then stopped. The forest settled again. The danger had not vanished, but it was no longer approaching. The commander finally lowered her scanner. "That's enough for now. Everyone back to the city." The guards released long breaths they had been holding. Their legs felt weak, but they managed to follow the humans down the hill. Citizens who had been waiting anxiously stepped aside to let them pass. Everyone wanted answers. Back in the city, the commander gathered the council and explained the situation gently. "It is coming," she said, "but slowly. We still have time to prepare more." Today was only the first contact observational. Nothing more. The elders exchanged worried glances, but they also felt something they hadn't felt since the crisis began. Control. The humans had not panicked. They had not run. They had not demanded the hide or evacuate immediately. They had simply watched and learned. Later that evening, when lanterns filled the city with warm light, some citizens approached the humans to thank them. They spoke in soft voices, offering fruits, bread, and small handmade charms. The humans accepted each gift with smiles and gratitude. One citizen said to the commander, "We were so afraid. But seeing you standing there so steady, it helped us." The commander smiled gently. "Courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you don't let fear control the moment. That simple sentence spread through the crowd like a comforting breeze by nightfall. The city felt different. Not safe, not yet, but stronger. The people have returned to their homes, whispering to their families about what they had seen. Parents told their children that the humans were watching over them. Elders whispered that they finally understood why Earth had survived despite being The humans, gathered at their camp, looked over their data again. They were tired, but their spirits were steady. They knew the real challenge was still ahead. Yet one thing was clear. The HFY were no longer facing this threat alone. They had allies who understood danger, who had lived through storms and hardships, and who would not step back when the shadows approached. And that made all the difference. As the days passed, the city began to change. The humans had made their presence a constant reminder that the world they had known wasn't going to end simply because a threat was approaching. They were helping them prepare, not just by building stronger or gathering intelligence, but by showing them what it meant to face the unknown without letting fear take hold. The night after the first encounter, there was a sense of quiet unity. The people spoke in hushed voices, recounting what they had seen. The humans standing firm on the hill, watching the strange creature in the distance without hesitation. Many still felt a nervous weight in their hearts, but it was different now. The fear that had gripped them before felt less powerful. They weren't alone anymore. The humans weren't exactly friends yet, but they had shown something that had never fully understood: the strength to remain calm in the face of danger. The idea that fear didn't have to that you could plan and act even when you were scared, was foreign to many. But it was also exactly what they needed right now. The commander spent much of her time walking between different groups of humans, and she checked on the work being done at the gates, the energy shields, the scanners, and the training of the guards. Each time she saw progress. Each time she saw the growing more confident. They were learning, step by step, how to stand firm when the world seemed ready to crumble. That afternoon, a new challenge emerged. The first scout reports from the surrounding regions had returned. The creature they had seen in the forest was not alone. A large group had been detected moving toward the valley, and this time they were closer. The humans immediately sprang into action. They reviewed the map, making quick decisions and setting up new plans. They watched them work, still amazed at how efficiently they moved. There was no panic, no rush to get it all done in a hurry. The humans simply went from one task to the next with purpose and clarity. The commander stood with her team, staring at the map. "We need to get additional barriers in place along the southern ridge," she said, pointing to the section of land where the creatures were now approaching. "And we need to send scouts out to gather more data. The closer they get, the more we'll know." One of the humans nearby asked, "What about there?" The commander turned to the guard, who had just approached. "I want them to help us. They're learning fast, and they've got the courage. We need them to keep watch with us." The guard nodded. There was a quiet pride in his face now, something that hadn't been there a week ago. They might not have understood everything the humans did, but they were beginning to trust them. More importantly, they were beginning to trust themselves. The humans worked quickly to position the last of the barriers. They were simple, effective, and sturdy, just tall enough to create a line of, but low enough for them to climb over if needed. The children were even helping now, passing tools and carrying small bags of supplies to the workers. It was a community effort, not just a military operation. Later, as the sun began to set and the warm light spilled across the valley, the humans stood side by side at the southern ridge. The scanners were now picking up a strong signal. The creatures were near, much nearer than anyone had expected. The air was tense, and though no one spoke, they all knew that something important was about to happen. The commander was again at the front, staring into the distance. Her calmness seemed to spread, reaching out to the guards and citizens standing behind her. Families watched from the city's edge, waiting for the signal. Some clutched each other's hands, while others whispered to one another, unsure of what to expect. One of the human engineers turned to a nearby guard and asked, "Are you ready?" The guard's voice was quiet but steady. "We will be." The two exchanged a look, one of understanding, of shared purpose. For all the differences between them, both the human and the understood the weight of this moment. They weren't just defending a city. They were defending each other. The scout had spotted movement. Not just one or two figures, but a group of them, large, lumbering shapes that shuffled in unison through the undergrowth. They were massive creatures, much larger than anything they had ever seen. But what struck the humans was not their size. It was their coordination. These creatures were moving together, following a pattern that hinted at intelligence. The human engineer quickly pointed to the scanners. "They're not just wandering. They're moving deliberately. Stay alert. But remember, we are here to observe first. We are not attacking yet." The guards, though still uncertain, held their positions. The creatures' shapes grew clearer now. They had long, heavy limbs and thick bodies covered in rough, matted fur. Their faces were too distant to make out, but their eyes gleamed with an unsettling focus. As the creatures moved closer to the valley's edge, the humans adjusted their equipment, and the Eshma slowly raised their weapons, more out of instinct than any real belief that they would have to use them. The commander's voice broke the silence. "We need to track their movement. Keep the scanners on them and report back every few minutes." There was a stillness as everyone waited. Then, the distant figures of the creatures stepped fully into view. They weren't rushing. They weren't running. They were walking slowly, deliberately, almost as if they were studying the land they crossed. A hum filled the air as the scanners analyzed the creatures' movements. The humans looked at the screens in front of them, narrowing their eyes as they processed the data. The Eshma guards watched in silence, their hearts racing, but their faces steely. They were ready for whatever would come next. After what seemed like an eternity, the first creature turned its head and looked directly in their direction. The movement was so sudden that it took everyone by surprise. The creature paused. For a moment, it stood still, watching them with dark, alert eyes. It was as though it knew it had been seen. The commander stood firm, watching the creature through her binoculars. "Don't make any sudden moves," she ordered quietly. "Stay still. We're not here to provoke them." The creatures did not charge. They did not retreat. Instead, they slowly turned away from the line of defense and continued their march, this time a little more cautiously. The moment stretched longer, until finally, the creatures moved deeper into the forest, their figures disappearing back into the shadows. The tension that had been building for so long suddenly seemed to drain away. The Eshma guards lowered, their weapons, their breaths shaky, but their eyes wide with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "It's over," one of the guards whispered. "For now." The commander let out a quiet breath. "Yes, for now." She turned to face the Eshma. "You did well. You stood your ground. And that's more than enough." Her words, though simple, struck a chord in the hearts of the guards and citizens. They had done it. They had faced their fear. They had stood together with the humans, side by side, and they had survived the first real challenge. The city wasn't safe yet, but it felt stronger. The Eshma were learning what it meant to face fear, to take action even when the odds were uncertain, and most importantly, to trust each other, human and Eshma alike. That evening, the commander gathered her team and shared a quiet moment with them. There was no celebration, no loud cheering, but the sense of accomplishment was real. The humans had shown the Eshma what it meant to be calm in the face of uncertainty. They had given the people of Eshma the most powerful thing anyone could ask for in the face of danger. Hope, and hope, as the humans knew well, was the first step toward survival. The days that followed felt like a slow, cautious calm after a storm. The creatures that had emerged from the forest were still a mystery, but the humans and the HFY had done something they hadn't thought possible. They had stood their ground. Together, they had observed and made it through the first encounter without direct conflict. But while there was a sense of relief in the air, it was mixed with uncertainty. Everyone knew that the creatures hadn't gone away. They were still out there, somewhere in the deep forest, waiting. The valley had become a strange place, half peaceful, half on edge. The people of HFY, with the humans' help, had created a fragile sense of safety. But everyone knew that safety wasn't something that could be taken for granted. Every day, the humans continued their work, tightening the security measures, scanning the horizon, and preparing for the worst. They were calm, focused, but there was something in their eyes that suggested they were ready for more. The HFY watched them closely, trying to understand this human determination. They saw the humans working together, without hesitation, without fear. In their hearts, the HFY began to realize that the humans were different, not just because they had powerful technology, but because of something deeper. The humans had hope, and that hope made them stronger than anything the HFY had ever seen before. That evening, after another long day of scanning the surrounding forest, the commander called for a meeting. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the valley, and the air felt thick with the weight of unspoken questions. The HFY gathered in the command tent, their faces serious and tired. The humans stood at the front, beside their equipment. The time had come to make decisions. Everyone knew that the calm they had been feeling was temporary. It was only a matter of time before the creatures would come again. The commander looked out over the group and spoke in a quiet but clear voice. "We've done well so far, but we need to plan for what comes next. These creatures are not like anything we've encountered before. They are dangerous and they are organized. We cannot afford to wait until they come closer. We need to be ready." The room was still, and the faces of the HFY reflected a mix of hope and fear. They had been through so much in the past few days, and they were exhausted. But now they were beginning to realize the truth. It wasn't just the humans who were capable of standing strong. The HFY had shown courage, too. They had faced the unknown, worked alongside the humans, and survived. But this next part would be different. This would be their real test. One of the HFY elders, an older man with a deep voice, spoke up. "What do you suggest we do? How do we fight something like this?" The commander looked at him, her expression calm but determined. "We don't fight unless we have to. The creatures are still moving in a pattern. Our goal is to observe them, track them, and make sure we understand them before they come any closer. We have to be smart about this." She paused, scanning the faces of the HFY before continuing. "You've learned a lot these past few days. You've learned how to use your strength, how to stay steady in the face of fear. Now, we need to teach you how to think like they do, how to think strategically." There was a long silence. The HFY knew the gravity of what she was saying. The creatures were dangerous, yes, but they weren't just mindless animals. They had intelligence. They had a purpose. And if the HFY wanted to survive, they had to understand that purpose. They couldn't just react to the creatures. They had to outthink them. Another human, a woman who had been working closely with the HFY, stepped forward. She was the one who had been teaching them how to use the scanners and how to read the data from the forest. "I've been tracking the creatures," she said, "and I've noticed something. They don't move randomly. They follow a pattern, just like we expected. But there's something else, something different." She tapped a few buttons on the screen, and a map of the forest appeared. It showed the movements of the creatures, their paths marked with bright, glowing lines. The map was filled with information, but one thing stood out. There was a clear route the creatures were following, a route that led straight to the valley. The woman continued. They are heading towards a specific area of the valley, and it looks like they're building towards something. Maybe they have a base, or maybe they're setting up something we don't understand yet. The Eshma leaned in, studying the map. The elder who had spoken earlier narrowed his eyes. A base? What kind of base? We don't know yet, the woman said. But the creatures are organized. They're not just roaming. They have a goal. The commander spoke again, her voice steady. This changes things. It means they are not just animals looking for food. They are planning. And that means we need to be ready for whatever comes next. For the first time since the creatures had been seen, the Eshma felt a flicker of real fear. They had always known that danger was a part of life, but this was different. These were not just creatures wandering the land. They were an organized force. And if they were building something in the valley, the city of Eshma would be in danger. The commander didn't miss the change in the room. She could see the fear in their eyes, but she also saw something else, a willingness to fight, to stand firm, even when the odds seemed impossible. She stepped forward, addressing the room again. This is not a moment to give in to fear, she said firmly. We are going to work together. We are going to watch them, learn from them, and plan our next steps carefully. And most of all, we are going to stay calm. We've already shown that we can face danger. Now we need to face it with our minds, not just our strength. The words hit home. The Eshma understood. This was their chance, not to just survive, but to win. Not by brute force, but by intelligence and strategy. The commander continued. We will set up new observation points. We will have scouts out at all times, tracking the creatures' movements. And we will strengthen our defenses along the southern ridge. The most important thing is that we stay ahead of them. We cannot afford to wait until they're at our gates. We have to stay one step ahead. There was no hesitation in the room. The Eshma stood taller, their faces now full of determination. They were ready. They were no longer just afraid. They were ready to fight, to think, and